Hey, it's Nikki, and today's episode is a special series called In the Loop, Communicating for Maximum Leadership Impact with my friends from Borshoff. I am a huge fan of the work Borshoff does to advance internal communication, and so happy that they have joined Gut Plus Science for a special series. Get ready for internal communication inspiration. There's so many nuggets of wisdom here.
Hey, it's Katherine Coble, your host for a very special Gut Plus Science series called In the Loop, Communicating for Maximum Leadership Impact. Our big goal is to help leaders become better communicators, because communication is your best tool for leading well. Let's go ahead and dive into this month's topic. Well, I'm very excited today to welcome Angela White to the show. She is president and CEO of the Eskenazi Health Foundation. It's really dedicated to supporting a healthy Indianapolis community through philanthropic support and guidance to Eskenazi Health. And we'll get into that a little bit more about what Eskenazi is all about. Before that, she spent 28 years as a consultant and a CEO at Johnson Gross Nickel and Associates, which is a well-known philanthropic consulting firm here in Indianapolis, and it has supported the work of hundreds of nonprofit organizations and helps them raise almost $3 billion in philanthropic campaigns. And that's just in the first few years. She also has a background in advancement and development and higher education at several different institutions. And last but not least, Angela is a leader that I have admired for many years because she's just a ray of sunshine and a passionate advocate for organizations that are doing so much good in our community. So, Angela, welcome.
Well, thank you, Katherine. I'm so honored that you would ask me to be a part of the podcast. You interview awesome people, so I'm grateful to be here and chat with you today.
Thank you. Well, thank you for being another awesome person that I can add to the list.
You're welcome.
So, I gave a little bit of background on you, but let's talk just a little bit more in detail about your current role at Eskenazi Health Foundation. And for those who may not be familiar, tell us a little bit about the foundation, but also about that separate entity, Eskenazi Health, and maybe how they're related.
Sure. So the foundation actually is kind of a teenager compared to our the mission that we supported Eskenazi Health. So Eskenazi Health has been serving the most vulnerable in Marion County for 167 years. And we, the foundation, were founded 41 years ago to serve really as a vehicle for a pass-through as grants were coming to Health and Hospital Corporation to support Eskenazi Health. And then the foundation grew from there. And certainly the privilege and opportunity to be a part of building what is now Eskenazi Health and the new hospital 12 years ago required much more philanthropic support than the foundation had ever raised in the past. And so those transformational years started about 16 years ago and certainly culminated in the naming gift of Eskenazi Health. And so we at the foundation are privileged to do two things. We raise money and we distribute money, all to support the mission of Eskenazi Health. And our ultimate goal is to improve the health of the community through those funds that we raise and that we distribute.
That's wonderful. Now, you just became the president and CEO fairly recently. Tell us a little bit about your team and what the team dynamics are working for the foundation.
Yeah, I did. I left my role after 28 fabulous years at JGA, working with a great team there, starting with Ted Gross-Nickel, our founder of Johnson Gross-Nickel and Associates, and the wonderful clients that the firm supported, and made the leap to come to the foundation to work with our team. We have 11 people on staff, and what stands out to me about our team is, to a person, their commitment to Eskenazi Health, their commitment to the patients we serve, and their commitment to funding the social drivers of health that have such an impact on our physical health and our mental health. And so as a team, we're focused tightly together on doing just that, and also supporting the many community partners that work with Eskenazi Health to address those social drivers, such as food insecurity, housing insecurity, lack of transportation, difficult access to health care. And so it's really a privilege to work with a team that is so focused on the mission of the health system and working with Health and Hospital Corporation also in serving that mission.
It's amazing how many things really do impact health, and they aren't things that you would normally think of a hospital being concerned about, but in the world that we live in today, there are so many things that we have to consider, and not just the reactive care that we might have thought a hospital provided, years ago.
Right. I mean, for example, we have a thriving program of art and music at Eskenazi Health to contribute to the patient's healing experience, as well as beautiful gardens and outdoor spaces, not only on our main campus, but in our community centers, so that again, the patient can have the healing of the outdoors and nature. So some of those things we don't necessarily think about, especially at a public hospital, but those are important to our patients and to the experience that we provide to them and to the respect that we show to them around the arts and around the quality of our facilities and the care that we provide.
Right. It's really addressing the whole person, not just the illness or the sickness or the injury that they have.
Correct.
So, as the president and CEO, you are the top representative of the organization, both internally and externally. I'm just curious, do you see those two roles differently, your leadership role internally versus externally, or do you see some overlap in the way that you lead in one area versus another?
That's a great question. I hope that I am equally as focused on transparency and clarity in my communication style, both internally and externally. I strive to be the same person, right? If you're coming into the office and you're seeing me interact with the team, or, if I'm having lunch or a meeting with a donor or a community leader or attending a community event. I think that, or what I hope that comes through for me, is the passion and commitment to mission and the way I articulate that. And also, the culture at Eskenazi Health that Dr. Lisa Harris has created as the health systems CEO is one of that transparency and respect. And so I strive to follow in her leadership footsteps in my communication style and the leadership culture or the leadership environment that I set to be the same, in both. Certainly sometimes the messaging is a bit different, right? Depending on if you're setting the stage internally for a project or explaining to a donor or a funder the project that you're working on. I think folks would tell you that it's the same.
That's great. So, are there any hard lessons, though? Maybe a misstep that you've had in the past? Maybe it was in this position, maybe it was in another position in the past, but I'm just curious of some sort of hard lessons maybe that you have learned over the years that have really shaped you as a leader.
Well, there are a couple things. I got a piece of advice from a coach when I was moving into the role of CEO at Johnson Grossnickel and Associates. And her advice in a nutshell was, remember now, no one really cares about you. They care about how you're going to take care of the team. Now, that was a pretty harsh way to say it to me, because I do believe that teammates care about the leader as well. But what she meant by that was, part of my personal style is I share. I share, what happened on the weekend. How was your weekend? This is what I did with my family. And I don't curtail that. I don't mean that in a oversharing way, but I think part of being a leader is helping people know who you are as a person in and outside of the workforce. But what I needed to learn as I moved into my first CEO role was, let's not start with, hi, what Angela did. Let's start with, Catherine, how was your weekend? What's going on with your family? Let's stop and pause a minute and always start with what's happening with you versus what's happening with me. And I think that that's a communication trait of a leader that's really important. Pausing to listen, always asking about the other person. You can tell I'm an extrovert. So sometimes I would just jump right into like my life and what was happening or what we had to do today at work and how this was going to be on the top of my to-do list, without pausing to think, really, let's flip the narrative and let's talk about what's happening with the person I'm speaking with, and let's listen more than talk. And so I think sometimes for me, the lesson was that, right? I think another lesson I learned, and if you ask a lot of people, they might not exactly describe me as patient. But in fundraising, that was different for me. I knew in my communication style with donors, it's listen more, talk less, and you're on the donor's timeline to have conversations and make gifts. So that was natural for me, but not always as natural in my leadership role to remember again, give people patience, give people grace. They're also on their timeline, not just my timeline of coming in like a swirling dervish and saying, "These are all the things we have to get done today, team. Let's go." And not everybody starts their day like that, right? I will tell you one misstep I made that sticks with me because I was very upset with myself about it. I was helping facilitate a meeting and the person coming to help set up like registration, in my eyes, it was getting close and they weren't there yet. So when they got there, I just walked up and said, "Good morning, Katherine. So great to see you. How can I help you?" And the person said, "You are offensive. Step back. I just got here and I need to figure out what's going on and you have offended me." And I was really shocked by that because I thought I was being my helpful self. So I guess part of what I'm trying to spit out here is lessons of self-awareness as a leader too. Right? How you think you're coming across as helpful and energetic and excited about the project might not always be received the same way.
Yes, absolutely. I love both of those points, and I think it really boils down to, like you said, self-awareness. And also a term I tend to use a lot is having an other orientation. Really putting other people at the center of your thinking. What are they thinking? What are they experiencing? How are they feeling about this? The more you can do that, I think as a leader, it sets you up to be able to adapt to the moment and to really understand and to communicate the things that need to be communicated so that the other person is aligning and tracking with you.
That is so important, and there's a great video that we use in training across the health system and that we've used at the foundation. It's about kind of a day in the life of people walking through the hospital lobby, right? There are no words, but as you see the people, the little bubble above their head appears with what is going on in their mind to remind us that everybody is coming to a place, a meeting, right? A morning at work or whatnot with whatever they're carrying with them. And we simply don't know what that is.
Absolutely, and especially given the, hospital and healthcare system that they're in when you're having interactions with them, it's likely to be quite a few things going on inside of their heads and inside of their hearts and their emotions. Okay, let's talk a little bit more specifically about Eskenazi and the work that you're doing there. Now, I believe that the foundation recently launched a program called the Beyond Barriers campaign. Tell us a little bit more about what that is.
Well, Beyond Barriers is a campaign that recently closed, and we're looking at what the next one is. But Beyond Barriers was our first real long term investment in what I call the social drivers of health, sometimes called social determinants of health, depending on who you're speaking with. And really, we helped fund putting in place an infrastructure to better address the social drivers of health with our patients, as well as concerted efforts across the community to do that. So, let me give you one example. One example is our Food is Medicine program. We know nutrition is so important to the health of our patient, also to being able to receive proper medical care that your body needs to be able to take in nutritious nutrients to do that. And that's not always the case with our patients, access to nutritious food or ability to purchase. So, what Eskenazi Health has done is create a screening process. So, in your medical record, when you come to your appointment, you're screened for food insecurity. If you present as food insecure, we begin a process that starts with a printed voucher to redeem food at one of our two locations, either the Fresh For You Market that's in front of the hospital or the Fresh For You Market on wheels. And now, proudly, a third location in a collaboration with Indie Fresh, which is the grocery store on the east side at Arlington and 38th Street. So we have an opportunity right away to begin to address a food insecurity need, connect that patient with SNAP counselors that are within Eskenazi Health, and then move them into more of a trusting situation with their healthcare provider to receive wellness coaching around how to cook nutritious food, and hopefully beginning to assist them in a process where they're not food insecure. So that's one way. We didn't have any of that structure in place before Beyond Barriers. So we were able to fund that, just as we're able now to fund community workers and weavers who work with our providers to follow up with patients, to make sure that they have transportation to come to their appointment, to follow up if they miss an appointment, and to be more of a community-based healthcare model. So those are key areas that came out of the Beyond Barriers campaign, as well as the creation of a research institute through a major grant from the Regan Street Foundation that allows us at the health system then to track all of these interventions and begin to find out what really is working to lower cost of care, lower readmission, lower emergency department visits, and how are we funding projects that will continue to improve the health of our community. And we can't make those funding decisions without data. So data driven and focused on the whole person and more than just the physical or mental health. And the other thing I would add to this is another thing you'll hear from us a lot at Eskenazi Health is there's no health without mental health. So we've invested in programs to build the capacity of our mental health staff to create peer recovery and peer coaching programs for people with lived experience, working with patients who would benefit from that. So a large focus on our Sandra Eskenazi Mental Health Center as well.
That's wonderful. Again, so holistic in everything that you're doing there. And I would think that that would be pretty attractive to your donor base. So I want to switch gears a little bit here and talk about that. Tell us a little bit more about the donor base for Eskenazi Health Foundation that the people that you're typically working with. What is it that they're looking for and how are you reaching them to share these stories?
Well, we're a little different as a public hospital foundation than our other foundation friends across the country and in Marion County and the surrounding counties, in that we have very grateful patients at Eskenazi Health. We do not have grateful patients who have a high level of capacity, by and large, to make philanthropic contributions. They make other contributions to us. For example, my story about screening for food insecurity, if we're screening you for food insecurity and giving you a food voucher, we're not in turn giving you a foundation brochure when you check out of the hospital, right? And so we have very grateful patients, but they're not building a base of annual fund support like many of our hospital foundations focus their work, which is great for them. And it's great for us too. We just do it differently. So it really starts for us with our board, our foundation board, a group of 30 people who are very strategic about the projects that we support. We're also different in many ways in that we're not a foundation that's providing the next mammogram or CT scanner to the health system. Not that we're against that. But again, I think I've given you examples that would illustrate the strategy behind the work that we're doing, and that our board wants to see gifts that leverage other revenue sources and other reimbursement sources so that long term the money's here to support, for example, the work in the social drivers. So it starts with our board of directors, their leadership and their generosity, and then opening doors to others. So most of the work we do in inviting generosity is face-to-face visits with community leaders who care about what's happening at Eskenazi Health. Those doors are open through our providers, who are also wonderful supporters of the foundation, through our board members, and through other ways. So we are privileged to have those conversations with donors and invite their partnership and their generosity. And when we have the data that I've referenced to show the outcomes and the impact of investing not only in what we would call clinical care, but the social care around the social drivers, that's very inspiring to donors. And certainly we have the stories that pull at your heartstrings, and we have the data to back up the outcome and the impact as well.
I think that's so important. You've got to have the human element to can make that emotional connection for the donor. But these are people who are really looking at this as a bit of an investment. They want to invest in their community. They want to invest in health. They have, their own family reasons for being donors. And so they're being very selective, and they probably are relying on not only information, but also impact, and really feeling like they get the story, that they get what you're trying to accomplish, and that they can be in support of that. So your communication has got to be just critical to those donors.
That's right, and that's a lot easier to explain buying a mammogram machine than it is the social drivers of health and what do you mean food is medicine and how does all that work? And so before I came to the foundation, a lot of work was done with our clinicians who are phenomenal to give their time to the foundation to work with our board and our donors and help us explain what are we talking about here and what's the impact. And the other thing that we always say is we need all of our health systems working together to build a healthy community. And so there's no competition, right? That we need all of our health systems across Marion County to excel. And we all have kind of our different niches to fill in that marketplace and in the philanthropic landscape as well.
Absolutely. There's no shortage of need when it comes to better healthcare in our community, or really any community.
Right. That's right.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the time before Eskenazi Health Foundation. You spent a little bit of your time, not a little bit, you spent a ton of your time in your career as a consultant. And during that time, you counseled quite a few leaders, I'm sure, at various nonprofits who really were interested in telling their stories to donors and to find that support, and to communicate that impact we were just talking about. What are some of the biggest mistakes that you think leaders make when they're trying to tell a compelling story to donors?
Well, I think it's the sunshine and rainbows and unicorns, piece of it. Certainly, we want to be inspiring. We want to share hope, how this investment's going to change lives, whatever that is, if it's healthcare, education, human services, the arts, whatever it is. And we also need to tell the other side of the story. Not all projects turn out to be perfect. Not everything is solved. I said that we started beyond barriers. We haven't solved the social drivers of health. We have a lot of work to do, right? And we're learning from our research about what works, what doesn't work. I think that is part of the challenge across our nonprofit industry. Sometimes I think our leaders are afraid to say something's not working and we need to pivot, or it's not working and here's why, or we're going to do a pilot project and it's okay to say that we learned from the pilot that this wasn't the right approach. So I don't mean that in a negative way, like we want to lead with the negative, but I think we want to be transparent. And I also think we need to understand, as I said earlier, that donors give from both the head and the heart. So we've got to have financials that support the project that we're working on, right? And we need to have the inspirational story that matches the financials. So you need both of those. So I think those are two things that I notice right off the bat. The other thing, and this changed a lot over my 28 years. You'll probably chuckle at this because it probably has not changed in your expertise, but shorter is better. Like, donors no longer want a 42-page coffee table book explaining the campaign priorities, right? They want short, they want to the point. Maybe they want it in a format other than a written document, right? And so being creative in how you tell the story, I think there's much more demand for that than there was when I first started in the consulting role 30 years ago now.
I would definitely agree with that. I can recall the days of helping a nonprofit hospital system that we worked with many years ago in my career, and helping with the annual community benefit report, for example. And those were, nice, beautiful books with lots of beautiful photos and long stories and pages of financial data and that sort of thing. And all of that's important, and all of it needs to be communicated. But the way that we do that today does look quite different, for all the reasons you would expect. People just have a different kind of an attention span these days. They are inundated with so much data. They like things more in a digital format. They want to still have that emotional connection, but we're finding other ways to do that with video or with interactive stories. social media gives us different kinds of opportunities, quick hits as opposed to just saving everything for a one time a year kind of a communication. So yes, the landscape has changed dramatically.
Well, and the other thing I said is the QR code is about the only happy thing that came out of COVID because we weren't using that QR code until we had to figure out how to eat. When the menu was a QR code, we were figuring it out, right? And so, again, that opportunity, you don't have to put every single word in your printed piece if you're using a printed piece, right? Let's drive them with the QR code to the website. Let's get the hits there. And so I think that's a piece that certainly changed over the years, but I really think it's that transparency and willingness to say this worked and this didn't work, and to tell the real story, and then to say, here's how your investment makes an impact, not just the outputs, but the impact.
Right. I think there's also a bit of a backtracking, or I don't want to say a backlash, but just a kind of an opportunity now to go a little bit old school with our communications as well. Face to face communication has always been really critical and really impactful. All the studies will tell you that over decades and decades. And we've done less and less of it over time, especially in the last 5, 6, 7 years. But what I think is interesting is we're starting to see this kind of shift where more leaders are taking the time to have the one-on-one conversations or to do the face-to-face conversations, smaller groups, more intimate settings, whether that's for an internal audience or for an external audience. And when we do those sorts of things, it does seem to bring together people in a different way, and it makes a different impact. It takes more time. It may take more effort, but depending on what you're trying to accomplish, it may actually be the most effective way to do it.
So stay tuned, but we this year are going to move from having a dinner for our donors where we might have 200 people, right, in a room, and we think about who's the speaker and all of that, to 3 smaller immersion experiences that will repeat 2 times each. So maybe one around food as medicine, maybe one around pharmacy automation, whatever they're going to be, right? One around gardens, so that we can bring together people in a smaller setting, have them select what topic they're most interested in, right? And give them that more intimate experience where we can talk with them rather than at them. So that's in the works for us this year. So I'll have to let you know how it turns out. But that was our goal, to have people in a smaller setting where they can really immerse themselves into what we're doing, in a room of maybe 25 people.
I love that. I think that'll really tell you a lot of things that you might not have otherwise heard or known. And I think that'll be a much more impactful opportunity to connect with those donors. I can't wait to hear how that goes.
I'll let you know the good and the bad, how it turned out and what we learned.
All right. So, as we start to wrap things up, I would love to just hear from you in your own words. Is there some sort of piece of leadership advice? You've shared a few things already, but something maybe that you wish that you had known earlier in your career as a leader that you know now, and maybe you're putting into regular practice, but you could have just really saved yourself maybe a little bit of heartache if you had started doing it sooner?
Yeah, I had a corporate leader, very successful corporate leader, who told me, "You need 2 things. You need to work hard and you need to prioritize personal care, because you need a high level of stamina to do your work and to put in the hours, and that does not come without a healthy mind and body." And so it might sound cliche, but I think of that all the time in terms of what am I doing to keep myself healthy and to give myself, that personal care, whether that's sleep hygiene, exercise, nutritional food, time, to let your brain be away from work and do something that is different than work, so that I can be the leader that I need to be. I can have the energy. I can work the hours I need to work, right? So to have the stamina, you have to have self care. And it's okay to say both of those words, stamina and self care. And that is something that, I'm certainly not perfect at it, but that I think about a lot as advice from that leader. The other piece of advice I got, actually, when I was moving into the CEO role at JGA, I interviewed several corporate leaders to learn about their leadership style. And one corporate leader then told me, do not be afraid of change, and don't be afraid to admit to your team, we tried it and it didn't work. We tried that idea. Now we'll try it first, right? And then if it doesn't work, don't be afraid to say, we tried it and it didn't work. So it's okay. We'll go back to the way we were doing it before, or we'll tweak this idea. So her advice was, don't be afraid of change, and don't be afraid to admit maybe your idea didn't pan out the way you thought it would. Those two pieces of advice have stuck with me. That piece of advice was probably given to me 30 years ago, and the other one probably at least 15 years ago, right? So those have stuck with me over time and hopefully are serving me well.
I love that. I think that's so important. And on that topic of self-care, I have found as I've moved up in my leadership as well, that I have been very intentional about taking care of myself because I know that it gives me more opportunity to help care for those that I lead. And I've also tried very hard to recognize in my other leaders, that next level of leaders, when they are not taking care of themselves and making sure that they know, hey, it's okay. You have to take care of yourself. You need to make the time. We have such hard workers, people who, go on a vacation and they say, well, I'll be checking my email, or, well, I'm going to work for half a day here or there. And while I appreciate it, and I appreciate their commitment, I try to just constantly tell them, "You've gotta have time for you, and if you can do that, it's going to not only make you feel better about yourself, obviously, it's actually going to make you a better leader of your teams."
Well, being other focused, I'll ask you, how does that work? Do you think you're accomplishing that with your team, helping them to be away?
It's hard. A lot of that is just how each of us is individually wired. You were mentioning earlier about that self-awareness piece. I'll just ask you this question. I don't know if you've ever done the Working Genius assessment.
Oh, no, I haven't.
Well, you'll have to do it sometime. Patrick Lencioni, he's
Oh,
great, and
I've read many of his books on leadership, yes.
well, I highly recommend the Working Genius assessment, because what it basically speaks to isn't so much about your personality, but it's really more about what kind of work brings you joy and energy. And so, kind of in a nutshell, all work, there's basically three major buckets of work. There's the ideation stage where you're trying to decide what's the problem, what kind of a solution do we need to invent, that sort of thing. Then you move into activation where you're making sure the team has what they need, you're getting everybody galvanized to do the work. And then you go into the actual implementation stage where you're getting stuff done. And you were talking about self awareness and the getting stuff done part. You're probably wired similarly to me. I'm very much a to-do person. I love my checklists and I love to get stuff done. Love to get stuff across the finish line. But what I have to recognize in myself is that while that's a great thing, if I don't spend the time necessary in the wonder and invention stage, we might solve the wrong problem. So, if that's not my gifting, I need to recognize that about myself, and I need to recognize that it's okay that I don't necessarily love that part of the work. I might be able to do it, but I just don't love it. And instead, make sure I'm surrounding myself with other people who will ask those questions and who will do the wondering and the inventing and that sort of thing. So it just helps you recognize where you have your own gaps because of your frustrations versus the things that really bring you joy and energy.
Well, the next time you talk to me, I'll be all fluent in the Working Genius. Thank you for the tip.
There you go. There you go. All right. Well, as we close up, I love to ask people this quick lightning round of questions. So I'm going to spring a couple of questions on you. And I just think it's fun because I think it tells a lot about a person, how they answer these questions. So
All right, I'm ready.
nothing scary.
Okay.
Okay. First question, dogs or cats?
Oh, dogs. Dog right at my feet right now.
I thought that would probably be the answer. Okay, vacation, mountains, beach, or city?
Beach baby all the time.
Beach. Okay, favorite or recent read that you would love to recommend?
Oh, I just read, if you like thrillers, I just read a cool book on a beach on vacation called Love Mom. but don't ask me the author because I'm really bad at remembering that. It's a really good thriller, and my idea of a good book is something that I takes me away from my day space, right? So there you go. That's what I just recently finished.
Very good. I love it. I'll have to check that one out. All right. Any final piece of advice that you want to give to other leaders?
Wow, I think part of being a leader is being yourself. And all the things we talked about today are, maybe pitfalls to avoid or things to learn or things to do. But part of it just comes down to being yourself. And you said it so well, leaning into what's natural and brings you joy and working on the parts of leadership that are not maybe my natural or your natural tendency, but we know we need them both. And so that's what I think. I think it's ultimately be yourself because you can't fake it till you make it as a leader. You have to be yourself and then learn and augment how you need to grow as a leader.
Love it. Angela, thank you so much for sharing with us today. Really appreciate your time. And to our listeners, keep striving to make an impact in your circle, no matter how large or small it is. And thanks for listening.
We just left the world a little bit better. Now, go do something with it.